In this video, we'll explain what a dwelling unit is, identify who are usual residents of the household, analyze family structure, and establish the household reference person. A dwelling unit is any building or separate and independent part of a building in which a person or group of persons are living at the time of the census. A dwelling unit can be occupied by one or more households. The essential features of a dwelling unit are separateness and independence. An enclosure is separate if surrounded by walls or other forms of partitioning, covered by a roof, so that a person or group of persons can isolate themselves from other persons for purposes of sleeping, preparing, and sharing meals. It is independent when it has direct access from the street or common landing, staircase, passage, or gallery, when occupants can come in and go out of it without passing through another person's accommodation. A household consists of one person who lives alone or a group of persons, whether related or not, who, as a unit, jointly occupies the whole or part of a dwelling unit. These individuals usually have common arrangements for housekeeping and generally eat together at least once per day. Here are some key things to look out for when trying to figure out who are usual residents of the household. Everyone, including domestic helpers, farmhands, and other employees who live in the dwelling and consider it their usual place of residence, should be counted as members of the household. If an individual sleeps in the same structure as the same household and shares at least one meal per day with the household, you should include him or her as a household member. A domestic employee who sleeps in the house or in an outbuilding on the premises is to be listed as a member of the household if he or she sleeps there on average of at least 4 nights per week and shares at least one meal daily. If the helper's partner or children live on the premises, all members of this family are to be included with the main household if they share meals with the main household. Please note that if there are separate arrangements for cooking, then they should be considered as a separate household. In the case of a tenement yard, where there is a series of rooms rented to different persons by the landlord, each person or group of persons who live and share meals together is regarded as a separate household. In the case of a tenement household, individuals may share an external bathroom, toilet, or even kitchen facilities with other similar households. Remember, a household is a residential unit, so all members of a household must live together and share at least one meal, which may be prepared or ordered from a restaurant. A household does not have to be a family, and one family can be a part of separate households. The Brackish family consists of Arnold, Patricia, and Peter. Patricia and Peter live in Clarendon, and Arnold lives in Manchester. Although they are one family, they live in separate households. Whenever you visit a household, you need to establish who are the persons, who live there, who are the persons who have common arrangements for housekeeping such as sleeping, cooking, etc. Which part of the house do these people occupy? After you have established the persons who form a household, you then need to establish who are the other persons and how many of these people form separate households. Having determined the separate household, what parts of the house do they occupy? Information on the parts of the house occupied will allow you to determine if they occupy the same dwelling unit or not. There will be times when you aren't sure which household individuals belong to. In cases like these, you should put them where they spend at least 4 nights for the week on a regular basis. If after all the questioning, persons still cannot determine which household they belong to because they seem to spend an equal amount of time in 2 places, put them in the household where they spend census night. Census night is between midnight and 6 a.m. on September 12, 2022. Remember, persons living together who do not cook but have meals brought to them are still a household, separate and apart from the household where their meals are prepared. In most cases, usual place of residence means the place the person being enumerated would name in reply to the question, "Where do you live?" It is the place where the person lives at the time of the census and has been there for some time or intends to stay there for some time. However, there are times when this isn't as clear. For example, for persons with more than one home, the usual place of residence will be the one at which the person spends the greater part of the year. That is 6 months or more. Therefore, in the case of an individual who has more than one place of residence because his or her workplace or school is away from home, the usual residence should be that place, whether it's a boarding school, other residence, or lodging, in which at least 4 nights of the week on average are usually spent. Remember, when in doubt, put the person in the household where he or she spent census night. Census night is between midnight and 6 a.m. on September 12, 2022. Fishermen away at sea are considered to have their usual place of residence in the dwelling where they live when ashore. Seamen or crew members on a vessel which plies between Jamaica and foreign ports are considered to reside on the vessel rather than at home. Air pilots are considered to have their usual place of residence in the household if they usually spend most of their off-duty periods in Jamaica and they live in that dwelling for most of the time. Persons engaged in shift work or who work at night, such as security workers, are to be enumerated as members of the household of their usual residence. Farm workers and other persons who work on overseas programs who are away for less than 6 months are to be included as part of the household where they usually live. If, however, they have been abroad for 6 months or more, or intend to be away for that period, then they are not to be regarded as usual residents. It is important to note that where a person has recently moved in with a group of persons, as long as he or she intends to make his or her home with them, that person is to be considered a member of the household. The institutional population comprises persons who are not members of households. These include persons living in military institutions, correctional and penal institutions, dormitories of schools and universities, religious institutions, households, and so forth are not members of households. Please note that personnel responsible for the running of an institution and not living in dormitories or similar accommodations should be excluded from the institutional population. Persons living in hotels or boarding houses are not part of the institutional population and should be distinguished as members of one person or multi-person households on the basis of the arrangements that they make for providing themselves with the essentials for living. For census purposes, every household must have a household reference person, HRP. This is the person to whom all other household members report their relationship. In the past, this person was designated the head of household. However, for the purposes of the 2022 Population and Housing Census, the HRP is being defined along 3 strict criteria. The first criteria relates to the responsibility for making household decisions. This includes major decisions such as where to live, the acquisition of assets and durable goods, choice of school for children, among others. If multiple persons are identified, the second criteria is used. The second criteria relates to the contribution to the household income. It does not necessarily relate to the person who earns the most income, but to the person who contributes the most financially to household expenses. If more than one person is still identified, then the third and final criteria is used. The third and final criteria in determining the household reference person is the age of the person. If multiple persons are still identified at this stage, then the oldest person should be identified as a household reference person. In the case of a group of unrelated persons sharing a dwelling on an equal basis, that member of the group whom the others acknowledge as such should be taken as a HRP. A person running and living at a boarding facility or similar establishment is considered to be the HRP of that household. In a one-person household, that person is the HRP. Always remember the HRP has to be a member of the household.